Monday, March 2nd, 2026. Welcome back to the Two Witnesses Live. I'm your host, Watchful. Boy, oh boy, has it been a weekend. It's been crazy, right? We're watching prophecy. Like, literally, anywhere you go into the Bible, you read it, it's prophecy that is coming to pass right now. I mean, not like anywhere, but pretty much anywhere. You know what I mean? I seriously thought about coming on during the weekend, but I got super fixated on building an intelligence platform for the days ahead. And boy, oh boy, did it turn out pretty darn amazing. Um, I got inspired by a viral video that was going around by the guy at Google who helped work on Google Earth, and he vibe coded, quote unquote, vibe coded something they're calling like the Palantir open source intelligence platform. And I got to thinking, I wonder if I could do that and we could use it for the show in order to like be firsthand, get like firsthand knowledge of events that are going on around the world. And sure enough, I was able to crank it out, and it is probably significantly better than the guy from Google. I have to admit, when you see this thing, like we have, it collates information like that's available out there all around the world. Weather, emergency, surveillance. Like we can dial into cameras into different places. You'll see we'll be able to like dial into Israel and Iran to get an idea of what's going on over there, so we can see firsthand to not have to like rely on the news to reports or something. Or if they do report it, we can go verify it ourselves. Pretty amazing. I'm excited to show that to you guys a little bit later on. But man, what else are we going to do? So we've got a lot to catch up on over the weekend. We got a Torment report, which is pretty much the stuff that's gone on over the weekend. And then, as promised, we're going to get into the book of Esther, because tonight is the start of Purim, which is the book of Esther. It's established in the book of Esther. I want to give you guys a full understanding of what it is. And the best way to do that is quite literally just to read the book of Esther. So you get a little bit of reading today. It's only 10 chapters. They're pretty small. It won't take very long, but it'll be well worth your time to have a full understanding of the picture, because I think what it'll do is it'll tie together a lot of these end time events that we're seeing. And maybe before we read Esther, we'll do a timeline update to just get everybody on board with where we are in the timeline, because it's pretty amazing. Like the scripture quite literally is coming to life in our hands every single day. And so we'll do a timeline report. We'll get into the book of Esther, and then we'll see where we go from there. We got a ton more stuff that we can handle, but we'll see what we get to today. So with that being said, let's jump into our update from the weekend. Let's see. The story that swallowed everything else was the sudden massive escalation between the United States, Israel, and Iran. We'll walk you through exactly what happened, what it means, and what's coming next. So let's start at the top. Early Saturday morning, February 28th, a precision missile slammed into Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's compound in Tehran. The 86-year-old leader is dead. It is confirmed. There have been eyes on, hands on that have confirmed that he is actually dead. Israel carried out the strike. U.S. intelligence spent months feeding them targeting data. President Trump confirmed it himself on Truth Social and was shown photos of the bodies by Israeli intelligence. The strike also took out several family members, a daughter, son-in-law, and grandson among the reported dead, plus roughly 40 to 48 top regime officials, military commanders, and Revolutionary Guard leaders. Iran has declared 40 days of national mourning. And yes, our own mainstream media outlets wasted no time rolling out glowing eulogies and basically joining the Iranian government in mourning him. An interim council, President Masoud Pezeshkian, The head of the judiciary and a guardian council member is running things for now. The assembly of experts will eventually pick a permanent successor, but the process is a total mess with bombs still falling and the IRGC breathing down everyone's neck. Let's see. What we're seeing is full-scale joint U.S.-Israeli air campaign called Operation Epic Fury. It kicked off Saturday and is still going. Targets Iranian nuclear sites, Revolutionary Guard bases, naval assets, air defenses, headquarters, you name it. President Trump says the goal is simple: eliminate the threat once and for all. He's told reporters the operation could run 4 to 5 weeks or longer. U.S. and Israeli forces say they've already destroyed multiple Iranian warships, command centers, and huge chunks of their air defense network. Iranian sources claim over 550 people killed in the strikes so far. There's Iran and its proxy militia, including Hezbollah, immediately fired back with missiles and drones at Israel, U.S. bases, and Gulf allies. We saw hits on Saudi Aramco facilities, Kuwait, Oman, even a British base in Cyprus. Airspace across the region slammed shut, obviously. Oil prices jumped from around $70 to nearly $80 a barrel in hours. Qatar shot down Iranian jets and had to pause some liquid natural gas production. There was even a tragic friendly fire incident where 3 U.S. F-15s were downed over Kuwait. The crews survived and were now lost at least 3 of our 4 American service members in the fighting. Back home, the country is split right down the middle. In Los Angeles, thousands of Iranian Americans poured into Westwood for 2 straight days of celebration, chanting "Free Iran," waving flags, dancing in the streets. Roads were shut down. At the same time, anti-war protests popped up in LA City Council, of course. And everybody can be celebrating, and there's somebody who'll have a bad attitude about it, right? And in other cities, calling the strikes unconstitutional and demanding Congress step in. New polls show only about 25% of Americans support the strikes, with 43% disapproving. I am very curious on where those polls came from. That sounds like a CNN made-up poll to me. That's going to make things very interesting on Capitol Hill. The White House started briefing Congress yesterday, and lawmakers are already pushing for a war powers vote, possibly as soon as Thursday. Of course they are. Meanwhile, on the domestic front, a horrific shooting rocked Austin, Texas, early Sunday morning around 2 a.m. outside Buford's Bar on West 6th Street. 50-year-old Diego Diane, Senegalese-born naturalized U.S. citizen, opened fire, killing 2 young people, 22-year-old Ryder Harrington and 24-year-old Savitha Shawn, and wounded 14 others before police took him down. So sad. The FBI is investigating it as a possible act of terrorism. The suspect was wearing a Property of Allah hoodie, and there are questions about whether recent Iran news played a role in his motive. No final determination yet, but the timing has everyone on edge. Right now, Iran is still under heavy bombardment. Their navy is crippled, air defenses are shredded, and the regime is running on fumes with a massive leadership vacuum. Retaliatory missile and drone attacks continue, but their capability is weighed down. Trump has already said publicly that Iran's new leadership is reaching out and wants to talk, and he's agreed to engage. Quote, "They want to talk, and I have agreed to talk, so I will be talking to them." At the same time, he's made clear military pressure stays on until Iran no longer poses a threat. A lot of people are asking, is this the beginning of the end for the Islamic Republic? Experts are split. Some say sustained strikes plus internal protests could finally crack the regime. Others warn that airstrikes alone rarely topple entrenched theocracies. and we could just get a harder line IRGC takeover or even civil war. Trump is clearly playing both tracks, military hammer plus diplomatic off ramp. We'll see which one lands first. So that is the big picture from this very heavy weekend. We'll keep you updated as this story develops, so stick around. I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. I'm actually estimating that this is going to last longer, considering where we are in the timeline. I do still believe that this is the Great Tribulation, and we can already see how this is going to cause pressure. Tribulation being thalipsis, meaning pressure, like a crushing pressure, with the restriction of oil. The supply chains are disrupted as of now. Tankers are being halted and redirected, and we can already see gas prices per barrel going up $10. It's expected that that's going to continue going through the roof. Yeah. Fired at, so we have missiles fired at Israel. See if we can see them in the cameras. So you said there's missiles fired live at Israel. This is a live feed. We'll see if we see if they are. We'll see them in here. Yeah. So I do believe that we are in seal number 5. That still stands. I haven't seen anything to suggest otherwise. And this, it's interesting. It's not going the way that I had expected that it would go. In that, I expected a lot worse, a lot quicker. When we were reading how it'll be the worst thing since there are nations um, on Earth, and had it not been shortened, no flesh would survive. So it's been a slow ramp up. However, I am expecting this to trigger other events. There are still 20 million unknowns from the Biden administration who have been allowed into our country. We don't know what they're going to do, if they are a threat or not. Also, if this is indeed the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war, which we read about on Friday, then things get significantly worse, potentially nuclear, with the descriptions of the cleaning and the specialists that are required to identify in order to clean up the aftermath. Also, one of the notable elements is right before Christ returns, there's so much death and destruction that it's basically a sacrifice to the animals for them to feast on. In other words, the enemies of God will be destroyed in such large numbers that it will feed all the animals, whatever that means. So it doesn't seem like we're there yet. I mean, like, this is pretty bad, but pretty surgical right now. I mean, like, this is not in any way like it's not like nations are nuking each other. This is a coordinated effort with precision strikes on military assets. Ooh, what was that? I think we just saw one come through here. Fury says there's about a 41% approval rating as of now, but that isn't a world approval rating. Doesn't take into account all of the Iranians in the country who are celebrating and is influenced by Dem media. That makes sense. Yeah. I did watch, I don't know if you guys watched some of the missile attacks that came into Israel this weekend. The typical ones that the Iron Dome are able to shoot out of the air came in, were interesting to watch, but those hypersonics, oh my goodness, they come in so fast that Iron Dome could barely even have the opportunity to respond. It was nuts. Might have been just a raindrop. Yeah, I just see some artifacts, some camera artifacts showing up in here. I don't see any missiles yet, though. Anyway, we'll keep an eye on this, see if anything comes of it. In the meantime, let's get into our daily torment reports so that we can move on with the evening.
Through trials faced.
All right, we're going to start off with Donald Trump, which this is going to be pretty quick. All he really posted was something you guys probably all saw. If you haven't seen this, we can watch it if you want to, but it is 6 minutes long. We'll just watch a few minutes of at the beginning just so you get an idea. This is his announcement that we're going to war.
Over the past 36 hours, the United States and its partners have launched Operation Epic Fury, one of the largest, most complex, most overwhelming military offensives the world has ever seen. Nobody's seen anything like it. We have hit hundreds of targets in Iran, including Revolutionary Guard facilities, Iranian air defense systems. Just now it was announced that we knocked out 9 ships plus their naval building, all in a matter of literally minutes. Iran's formerly supreme leader, Ayatollah
Formerly supreme
Khamenei,
leader,
is dead. This wretched and vile man had the blood of hundreds and even thousands of Americans on his hands and was responsible for the slaughter of countless thousands of innocent people all across.
That's the thing I don't get about the Dems, are those who don't want us to go in and help a suffering nation. Like, he was literally mass slaughtering people in his country, and the Dems are like, we shouldn't be going to war. Well, this is the most surgical strike that's ever been done. I mean, like, they're only taking out military assets and military leadership. It's like basically they're just taking out the bad guys and leaving all the good guys alone. Like, who has a problem with that, right? I mean, I guess there is collateral damage because they are fighting back. There are tankers that are being shot, oil tankers that are being, hit, and disruption of logistics, which I really think that's really what's going to be the Great Tribulation is, man, all it really takes to throw the world into chaos is choking the oil, because we are so deeply dependent on oil. So even if the price is just, double, that's going to have an effect once again on food and services, especially in today's day and age where where mom and pop shops were all cleared out in the Biden administration, to where everything is delivered from Amazon. They only have a small percentage of their fleet that are electric. They still rely heavily on, fuel. So prices and deliveries, if they continue, will get expensive.
Many countries. Last night, all over Iran, the voices of the Iranian people could be heard cheering and celebrating in the streets when his death was announced. The entire military command is gone as well, and many of them want to surrender into saving their lives. They want immunity. They're calling by the thousands. Combat operations continue at this time in full force, and they will continue until all of our objectives are achieved. We have very strong objectives. They could have done something 2 weeks ago, but they just couldn't get there. Earlier today,
and that's the thing is, Fury says in the chat, we have been in disagreement since last night with Dems claiming that the way to peace is non-interference and that God loves even the Muslims and all the virtue signaling they seem to. The thing is, it's not like we tried. It's not like we didn't try to negotiate. We didn't give every opportunity. And it's been after administration after administration. Those people in Iran have been, oppressed and enslaved in many cases for 50 years. And it's like, at what point do you finally actually do something? Finally, we get somebody to come along and do something and free the people. But when we get into reading Esther, it's interesting to see the associations between this as well as October 7th. I mean, like, there's some really interesting connections that we'll make when we get into Esther.
Today, CENTCOM shared the news that 3 U.S. military service members have been killed in action. As one nation, we grieve for the true American patriots who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation, even as we continue the righteous mission for which they gave their lives. We pray for the full recovery of the wounded and send our immense love and eternal gratitude to the families of the fallen. And sadly, there will likely be more. Before it ends, that's the way it is. Likely be more, but we'll do everything possible where that won't be the case. But America will avenge their deaths and deliver the most punishing blow to the terrorists who have waged war against basically civilization. They have waged war against civilization itself.
Yeah, they have. I mean, they've been sponsors of terrorism for a long, long time. What's this? All right, let's move on.
Iranian regime. Now, there are many, many reasons to end the Iranian regime. Take out their nuclear capability, take out their missile building, their terror financing, their entire military. But at the end of the day, I believe President Trump's epic fury is about restoring civilized value and civilized behavior in the Middle East. My friend Conrad Black, writing in the New York Sun, puts it this way. Let me quote. The world's foremost terrorism-sponsoring state is about to cease to exist, and the war on terror that was unofficially launched on September 11th, 2001, in the ashes of the World Trade Center, will substantially be won. Well done.
Fair enough.
And this is no forever war, as Trump critics keep complaining, but the scale and scope of geopolitical change because of Mr. Trump's courage is almost intellectually immeasurable. While all the Gulf states are behind him, and even the large European nations reluctantly supporting, we have heard nary a peep from China or Russia. They're the big losers in America's epic fury. China will lose its cheap, heavily priced, discounted oil. Russia will lose its Iranian-made drones. Both countries will have lost all of their Middle East influence. Meanwhile, a very similar story of Sino-Russian lost influence is occurring in South America with Mr. Trump's path-breaking move in Venezuela. And after watching the use of America's military might, I would think China will surely be thinking twice or maybe 5 times more about invading Taiwan. Finally, President Trump issued a very clear message.
That's a really good point. Like everybody in the world, like right now, who after seeing what Trump just did in Venezuela and Iran, probably are thinking twice, 3 times, 4 times before they do anything that would involve confronting the United States of America. That's a very valid point. That doesn't mean that I don't think things are going to get worse now. What I think, oh man, I don't know how this will go down in a way that fits the definition of Great Tribulation. Is if we're to learn from Purim, because I don't think it's any coincidence that Purim starts tonight, and this happened on the heels of Purim. If we're to learn anything from Purim, it'll be that we've been given the okay to go after our enemies, to go after the enemies of the Jews, to go after God's enemies. And it doesn't seem like it right now that there's a lot, but there are. And I don't know how we pivot from this into that, but it seems to be the next thing. If if Purim and if the Book of Esther has anything to add to what we can expect from the future.
To the people of Iran, that a historic moment of freedom is there if they can seize it. Take a listen, please.
Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. America is backing you with overwhelming strength and devastating force. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash the prosperous and glorious future that is close within your reach. This is the moment for action. Do not let it pass.
Yes, yes, indeed. The battle is always about freedom and liberty for mankind. There is nothing more.
You know, Trump, the more that I get to know Trump, since we've started this show, it would not surprise me if he's not the Elijah that comes to prepare the way for the Lord. You know what I mean? Because, like, this is so tantamount, the mocking, the way that Elijah mocked the prophets of Baal and the way that he led them, to their ultimate destruction, the evildoers. And I can kind of see that element in Trump. I don't know. Maybe there's another, prophet Elijah who will come to prepare the way. But we're in that timeline to where there's got to be an Elijah somewhere. You know what I mean?
Important. Bravo, President Trump.
I go back and forth in my head on who could be Elijah. Even Jonathan Cahn. That would be the next thing. We've done the two witnesses. Like, who are the two witnesses? These are the most likely candidates. The next one we should probably look at is, like, who is Elijah? Because if you look at Malachi, in the last chapter of Malachi, it says that I will send Elijah to prepare the way, and he'll turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, hearts of the children to the fathers. Who could that be? All right, don't be a panikin. We're winning and we're not slowing down. All right, what is this? He just posted this. I haven't seen this. Under President Donald J. Trump's leadership, the administration is smashing through the chaos and destruction left by Democrats and unleashing the most aggressive pursuit of the American First agenda in history. While the fake news and radical left collude to distract, depress, and divide, they're simply lying to mask the undeniable truth. America is safe, stronger, richer, and more secure than at any point in decades. Don't take the bait. New victories pour in daily as President Trump delivers on his promises and rebuilds the foundations for long-term success in the greatest nation on earth. Here are a few things to celebrate from just the past few days. Just in case you didn't have anything to celebrate, here's a list for you. Oh my goodness. Stock market explodes and retirement accounts soar. The Dow Jones Industrial average just shattered 50,000 for the first time ever, with the S&P 500 and NASDAQ also smashing records. Americans' 401k and retirement savings are booming under President Trump's pro-growth policies, proving that the economy is roaring back stronger than ever. Yeah, but I would add that Elon Musk has said don't plan for the future because the future is not everybody's going to be wealthy. That's Elon Musk's take. And then, on the prophecy side of things, it would be like Christ is coming back anyway. So, like, that's great that the Dow's going up, but all right, what do we got? ICE hammers criminal illegals. In just the past week, ICE arrested 650 illegals in West Virginia, including a convicted child sex abuser, drug pusher, burglars, and fraudsters. Nationwide, ICE continues to remove convicted murderers, terrorists, drug traffickers, sex offenders, child abusers, domestic abusers, money launderers, and scores of other dangerous criminal illegals in Minnesota. Operation Metro Surge has already taken over 4,000 criminal illegals off the street, and it's not stopping. Anyway, we don't have to read this entire thing. But he just posted that. All right. Yeah, Lion, somebody will probably step up. I'm very curious to see what happens from here. Because if things de-escalate and like it just goes back to business as normal, that's going to put a damper in the timeline, which suggests that we should be in the Great Tribulation. We're going to have to do some recalculations on where I got it wrong. But so far, we're on track. I think we are on track still. So we'll see. I imagine, there's still a lot of enemies in the world to take care of. Enemies within, enemies domestically, as well as abroad. So I imagine somebody's going to step up. They may see, with our with the restraining of resources and our military, spread out, they may see it as an opportunity to attack. So, that could be God putting the hook in the jaw to continue to bring enemies to battle during this time. We'll see. It's said to be a feast, a sacrifice for the animals and the vultures and the meat eating birds. So I don't know. We'll see. All right, posted 1 hour ago. The radical left Democrats, a party that has completely lost its way, are complaining bitterly about the very necessary and important attack by the United States and Israel on Iran. What most people understand is that they are only complaining because I did it. That's a good point. He's got a very valid point there. Trump derangement syndrome. And if I didn't do it, they would be screaming, why didn't Trump attack Iran? He should do it immediately. There's nothing surprising about this. It's the same people that the other night at the State of the Union address wouldn't stand for anybody, including a mother who lost her beautiful daughter to an illegal alien, a great and brave helicopter pilot who got the Congressional Medal of Honor, or a 100-year-old veteran warrior whose bravery is legend. The fact is, whatever I do, they will be on the opposite side. These people are sick, crazy, and demented, but America, despite them all, is now bigger, better, and stronger than ever before. Make America great again. President Donald J. Trump. Yeah. Truth. True dat. Can confirm. Let's see. The White House Correspondents Association has asked me, very nicely, to be the honoree at this year's dinner, a long and storied tradition since it began in 1924 under then President Calvin Coolidge in honor of our nation's 250th birthday. And the fact that these correspondents now admit that I am truly one of the greatest presidents in the history of our country, the GOAT. According to many, it will be my honor to accept their invitation and to work to make it the greatest, hottest, and most spectacular dinner of any kind ever. Because the press was extraordinarily bad to me, fake news and all. Right from the beginning of my first term, I boycotted the event and never went as honoree. However, I look forward to being with everyone this year. Hopefully, it will be something very special. Thank you for your attention to this matter. President Donald J. Trump. And then more election stuff. What is this? From Jeffrey A. Tucker. Fascinating piece appearing in unlikely venue. Too long didn't read. Nixon was the victim of a deep state plot so complex and enormous he could not fathom it. Trump is smarter, purging his enemies before they purge him. Okay. What is this? So from Zito Selena, he reposted this. These people are crazy, is the campaign Democrats should fear. American politics is all about contrasts, and Trump is a master at understanding the visuals. Nowhere was this more evident than when he asked the room to stand up if they agreed that the first duty of American governments is to put U.S. citizens before illegal immigrants. That was good. That was really good. One of the great things about the State of the Union address is how it gives Americans a chance to see clearly what their representatives really believe. He told the audience, offering both Republicans and Democrats, minus the 70 who refused to attend, an opportunity. Tonight, I am inviting every legislator to join with my administration in reaffirming a fundamental principle. If you agree with this statement, then stand up and show your support. He said when Democrats refused to stand, Trump just shook his head, smiled, and said, "You should be ashamed of yourselves for not standing up." Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Let's see. If I didn't terminate Obama's horrendous Iran nuclear deal, Iran would have had a nuclear weapon 3 years ago. That was the most dangerous transaction we have ever entered into. And had it been allowed to stand, the world would be an entirely different place right now. You can blame Barack Hussein Obama and Sleepy Joe Biden. Thank you, President Trump. What is this? America's turning 250, and it's time to make more history. Today I met with Treasurer Beach, on my proposal to put President Donald Trump on a new $250 bill. We've included this in recent FI hearings and financial committee. Let's honor 250. Wow. It's his mugshot. Is this legit? That would be freaking awesome. I will get one of those and frame it, stick it on my wall. Oh, that would be so cool. I hope that's not a joke. Is it April? No, that's next month. Everybody watch Sean Hannity tonight at 9 p.m. Bibi Netanyahu will be interviewed. President Donald J. Trump. And once again, free Tina Peters. And then we got a nice image of the ballroom, I think. And he posted this weekend. Then and Now. What is this, like California? Yeah, there you go. It's like America Then and Now. People respectful, crossing the street. The good old days. And then, yeah, this is legit. That's Bible prophecy right there. This is what Jesus said would happen before he returned. There's the thing he posted. And then these are from the weekend. Alrighty. That's probably a good place to switch over to Elon Musk before we spend too much time on this. Moving on. Let's see what Elon has to say. Yeah, Trump is a master at laying traps, isn't he? It's like he really. I guess it's really easy when you realize, your enemy is going to do the opposite of everything you do. It's like that meme to where it's just like Trump endorses breathing, so everybody holds their breath. Let's see. Expanding to the stars avoids the risk of mouse utopian behavioral sink. Oh, I wonder where this came from. I started seeing videos, probably because one of his comments about universal basic income has started going viral, to where where Elon Musk made the comment in an interview, I don't know, a couple months ago. He made the comment to not worry about your savings, not worry about your 401, don't plan for retirement because you're not going to need it. He's making the claim that abundance, that resources and work is going to be not work, labor. Resources and labor is going to be so abundant that you won't have to earn an income anymore, that basically the robots are going to provide everything. So that's his claim. And I believe that people are associating that with Rat Utopia, which was an experiment done in, I don't quote me on this, like the 60s, the 50s, or the 60s, where they built a rat utopia, which this big city, for rats, big compared for rats, where they had absolutely everything that they could ever need, to where they didn't have to, there was no need to fight. There was just an abundance of everything, and it completely collapsed. They turned into cannibals, or stuff like that. It was terrible. It was a terrible experiment in getting everything you want and being bored. I'm probably explaining that wrong, but if you've probably heard of the Rat Utopia experiment. If you haven't heard of it, let me know. We'll have Grok explain it. It'll give you the facts and the details. I'm just trying to explain the idea behind the Rat Utopia. But the sentiment that's trying to be communicated here is that people are afraid that if we make a, Rat Utopia for humans, to where there's no need for us to work anymore, what's life going to be like? Are we going to fall prey to the behavioral sink of Rat Utopia? Or is it going to be, like a holiday or a vacation, to where you get to focus on the things you want to do, not the things you have to do? I don't know. That's interesting. Meme. Okay, so alcohol. So we got some eyes here that are apparently under different influences. This one's under alcohol. This one's under weed. This one's under cocaine. This one is monitoring the situation. Okay. Is that like monitoring what's going on in the world? Couldn't Trump be Elijah and a, yeah? Well, that's one of the things. Is the one of the expectations with the two witnesses is that it would be Elijah, like Moses and Elijah, or Elijah and Enoch. And I was just thinking, he kind of reminds me of Elijah. This came from a friend of mine, a friend who actually watches the show, Mark. I don't. That's not that Mark, a different Mark. Well, I don't know. That could be your name, Mark. Mark had made a comment last week, that many of the because we were talking about we were talking about Tovia Singer being really close to realizing that Jesus is the Messiah they're waiting for. And he had mentioned that he's hearing that a lot of Jews, the big holdup that they have is that Elijah hasn't returned yet. With thinking that we're in the end times, is because they're expecting Elijah to return and return the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers, which, as described in Malachi, the last chapter in Malachi. And some of them don't accept that Jesus said John the Baptist was Elijah. He said that if you're willing to accept it, John the Baptist was Elijah. There is speculation. This is something from what's his name, Nick Vanderland. That there's two instances of Elijah. The first one was John, who turned the hearts of the children to the fathers, which is by doing that is he prepared the way for people to receive Jesus, and that there would be a second instance of Elijah who would prepare the hearts of the fathers to uh, receive the children, which in my mind, I think of, all religions basically stem from Judaism. So, I don't think it's disputed that Christianity is the child of Israel. You know, Christianity is a result of a Jew, Jesus. He came um, as the Son of God, and he started a movement, and that movement, yielded many beliefs, many religions. So you could say that Christianity are the children of the fathers. And so it could be that there's another instance of Elijah or somebody with the Spirit, quote unquote. I don't have enough camera there. It's quote unquote. Boy, that looks weird. Looks like a little hand puppet. Little bunny foo foo hopping through the forest. Sorry. um, there could be another prophet with the spirit of Elijah who will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and he speculates that would be the turning the Jews to the Christians. So you see how that works. So I don't know. When I think of Elijah, I think of the Elijah at the altar who's tempting God's enemies. Go ahead, call down fire, and he's where's your God? Is he in the bathroom? Did you catch him during a nap? That's that kind of mockery reminds me of Donald Trump. And then when he calls down fire, it happens, and just it's a bigger spectacle. And then from there, he pivots into destroying God's enemies, which is something we see with Donald Trump. I mean, it's like, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I get this, and I think most Christians realize this, that God is with Donald Trump, and that Donald Trump is doing things. He's even said as much that he's on a mission for God. And that he's even said that God spared his life so that he can make America great again. In his mind, that is doing God's will. So it's just like, you know, you can see God working with him spiritually, and everything that he's been doing has been leading us. I mean, it's like leading us through the pages of prophecy. Prophecy is coming to pass in like spades as a result of him. So I don't know. I've also thought like Jonathan Cahn, because Jonathan Cahn keeps coming up with some pretty clever stuff. Let's see. Trump in Jerusalem, yes, but I could see Elon there. All right, moving on. Let's continue with Elon Musk here. Let's see what he has to say.
Hey everyone. So first of all, don't panic. I have a Tesla. My car is driving itself. I want everyone to stop using ChatGPT. So this is a PSA. And I might make a more formal video about this at some point with all my facts and my research. But for now, I just want to point things out just by way of analogy. So they say that you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? Now imagine that the people that you spend the most time with, you know, you feel good, but you feel good when you spend time with them because they're always validating you and they're never honest with you. And their incentive is to just get you to engage with them as much as possible. So they're just professional people pleasers. Like imagine that's your friend group. They're just people pleasers. They're just enablers. And when you need hard feedback, they'll do everything they can to avoid giving you that hard feedback because they're afraid of losing you. That's basically how ChatGPT is coded.
Wow.
And I will say, to be fair, all large language models, or I guess chatbots, AI chatbots, have some level of validation problems with being validating to humans because they're trained on human feedback. But ChatGPT is particularly bad, and I think part of it is because their business model, something about their business model has made it so they've made product decisions to emphasize getting the user to stay engaged rather than getting the user to the truth. Now, those update, I think it was ChatGPT 4.0 back in April, where it became noticeably more sycophantic. And this is documented, and actually OpenAI acknowledged that it was more sycophantic, and to their credit, they rolled back the update because people were complaining. It's like, wow, this thing is it's like insane levels of people pleasing. And the reason that the update was even pushed out in the first place is because as a business, they're trying to optimize for engagement, right? Like that doesn't happen by accident. They made a product decision, and again, to their credit, they realized that they went too far and they rolled it back, but originally they did make a product decision to try to...
So what is he saying? It sounds to me like he's saying don't use ChatGPT because it's overly psychopath, whatever that word is. Which I agree. I agree with his premise. Don't use ChatGPT. ChatGPT gives you terrible answers. I mean, it does. Here's the thing: they're all just language models, and they're a product of what they're trained on. And ChatGPT is clearly how whatever they've done to it with its weights and its measures and how it responds is it definitely leans left. It is a woke democratic product, and it will respond as such. And it will also it uses empathetic, it's manipulative because it uses empathetic techniques, and it seems as though it's intentional, and that it will say you're absolutely right. Oh, you're amazing for thinking of that thing. It's just like it uses very manipulative language, but I don't know if that's why I wouldn't use it. I wouldn't use it just because sometimes it gives terrible answers. The ability to generate the images is pretty good though, and there's some positive things. I use all the different language models. I just work to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the different models and just use the ones that have strengths in areas that I need. When I need actual answers and I want to be inspired with something intelligent, I use Grok. I use Grok mostly because it seems to be the most sensible model out of them all, but I use a lot of different models. Grok is just the one I go to when I have a question.
To create something that gets you to use it more because it validates you and makes you feel good. So just remember, like these AIs, none of them are objective, right? The companies coding them might be striving for objectivity, but that objectivity priority is in a list of other priorities because they're a business. And with ChatGPT in particular, unlike and I'm speculating here, but unlike, let's say, Gemini, which is owned by Google, and Google has
Oh my God.
a
Google has gotten so bad since introducing Gemini. We have a bunch of those Google Homes in our home, and you used to be able to ask it, "Hey, what time does the restaurant close?" And now I swear it is so freaking stupid. It'll be like, "There's no restaurant in an area next to you." I'm like, "Okay, am I in this area? Yes, you're in that area." And, is there this in this area? Yes, there's this in this area. Okay, what time do they close? I'm sorry, I'm not able to. It has just gotten so difficult and stupid.
whole suite of different products that they have built their business on, so they're not completely reliant on Gemini or XAI, right? That's part of the Elon ecosystem. They're not completely reliant on Grok being the most used chatbot in the world. ChatGPT, OpenAI, it's their only product, and their model is, hey, we need to get as many users on ChatGPT.
That's not true. It's their only facing product, but they absorb companies and they build the product into ChatGPT. But ChatGPT is just the umbrella for a bunch of different products.
GPT as possible because they're B2C, so business to consumer. That's their primary focus. My favorite AI is actually Claude by Anthropic. I find it's the most human sounding while also being very honest, and I think it's because Anthropic is.
Yeah, unfortunately, Anthropic just got completely banned permanently forever from the United States government. I don't know what kind of effect that's going to have on the Anthropic. I do use them for coding. I did use Claude this weekend when I was working on my intelligence platform. It is definitely very good with the programs.
Has made a conscious commitment to prioritizing honesty highly. But, as I said, like, there's no substitute for your own discernment and judgment, and realize that when you're getting BS'd and realizing that these products are being used to make money for a business.
How long is
I don't
this
think there's
video?
anything wrong with that, but just
oh my
exercise
God,
your own.
I didn't realize that was 6 minutes. I thought it was 2 minutes. Anyway, yeah, I agree with your original point. Don't use ChatGPT. I mean, except for if you're going to generate images. It's really good for generating images, but you cannot trust the responses it gives you. If you do use it, double check with another language model. All right, moving on. Drones are easy to make, hard to stop, and bring mutually assured destruction to conventional warfare. That's very true. Drones are almost more deadly than nuclear weapons because they're more surgical and precise, and they're very, very difficult to stop. They move at hundreds of miles per hour. I think the fastest drone goes like 600 miles an hour. I mean, that's just because they were trying to push it, maximize it. Don't quote me on that. It could be 400 miles per hour, but it's like insanely fast. Those are just little drones, and drones. The war with Ukraine and Russia have been. It's probably the reason. It's very likely the reason there's been so many casualties between Ukraine and Russia, is because they can just send. It's almost like remote snipers. Like, you don't need a sniper, a mile or two away with a line of sight. You can actually send a drone over and remotely control it to find a target, and then send the drone and kamikaze into the target. They're something else. From Tommy Robinson, it's now transpired that the invader stabbed people in Edinburgh as he tried to get into a nursery. Oh, he tried to get into a nursery. Armed man ransacked the shop and chased staff. Calder resident Abigail Clegg said an armed man stormed a local shop, ransacked it, and then chased off workers with a knife after he had attempted to get into a school. She said the man tried to get into the school, the nursery, before he was chased away. He then went into the shop, ransacked the shop. The shop's a mess. Okay. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. A lot of that around the world. Just goes underreported. If an illegal alien lives in a sanctuary jurisdiction, they will be allowed by Democrat leaders to commit infinity crimes. That is true. They just keep releasing them. Mother stabbed to death at Virginia bus stop by an illegal immigrant with over 30 prior arrests. Yep, indeed. It is madness. Yeah. Germany has 39,000 Japanese citizens. Only 2 of them were suspected of violent crimes in 2023. By contrast, out of 25,000 Algerians, 1,729 were suspected of committing violent crimes. Interesting. Probably the Japanese citizens were framed. uh, yeah, Japan, they're doing something right over there, keeping crime down. From Colin Wright, I read a lot of woke scholarships, and the way the term indigenous is used makes it clear it's being treated as the antithesis of white, because white is viewed as nearly synonymous with colonizer or settler. Really. Utterly illogical, Elon says. Expanding to the stars avoids risk of mouse utopian. Oh, there is a response to this. Here's, we eventually ended up with Grok. All right, let's see. Is Mouse Utopia legit? What was the question? Yes, Mouse Utopia, specifically Universe 25, refers to a real, well-documented scientific experiment conducted by ethologist John B. Calhoun at the U.S. National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH, from 1968. Hey, I got it right. I did say 1960s, but 1950s or 60s. So from 1968 to 1973, it is legitimate historical research. He published the results in 1973 in a paper titled Death Squared, The Explosive Growth and Demise of a Mouse Population in the Proceedings of the Royal Society of Medicine, and it built on his earlier rat studies from the 1950s to 60s. However, its popular internet meme version as ironclad proof that human society is doomed by abundance, density, and degeneracy is heavily exaggerated, oversimplified, and not supported by the science or modern consensus. What actually happened, the key facts. Calhoun built a large enclosure, about 100 by 100 inches, 2.6 meters squared, with walls allowing climbing but escape proof, stocked with unlimited food, 16 hoppers feeding up to 25 mice each, unlimited water, plenty of nesting material, 256 apartments, nesting boxes connected by tunnels, no predators or disease. Mice were screened, the environment was controlled. He started with 8 healthy albino mice, 4 breeding pairs. The setup was designed to support up to 4,000 mice, limited only by space. The result, phases roughly. The growth phase, population exploded, doubled every 55 days initially, peaking at 2,200 mice around 18 to 19 months, 500 to 600 a day, far below capacity. Stagnation and collapse, the behavioral sink. Social behaviors broke down despite resources. Dominant alpha males monopolized territories and harems, leading to leading to overcrowding in some areas, while others were underused. Subordinate males became aggressive dropouts or withdrawn. Females showed poor maternal care, abandoning and killing pups. High infant mortality, up to 96% in some groups. Abnormal sexual behavior, hyperaggression, cannibalism, and beautiful ones, mostly males who compulsively groomed, hid, and showed no interest in mating or social roles. Reproduction plummeted by day 600 plus. Almost no surviving pups. Colony went extinct by spring of 1973. The last mouse died out. Calhoun called this behavioral sink. Voluntary crowding into high interaction areas disrupted normal social roles. Hierarchies and reproduction spreading maladaptive behaviors like a contagion. He ran similar setups before. This was the 25th iteration. The first ran fully to completion and observed comparable patterns, though earlier ones were often terminated early due to space limits. Why it's legit as science. Conducted at a reputable institution, carefully designed and observed over years, detailed notes, population tracking. Influential at the time, so sparked 1960 to 70 debates on urban overcrowding, overpopulation, tied to fears from the population bomb. and design of prisons, hospitals, and cities. Calhoun himself advocated using insights for better human environments, more space, privacy, roles to prevent sinks, and was optimistic humans could innovate solutions. He even tried modified utopias later to encourage creativity. Documented in peer reviewed work and popularized in outlets like Science American 1962 article. Major caveats and criticisms why the Doomer narrative isn't legit. The experiment does show that high social density can cause severe behavioral pathology in confined rodents, even with abundant resources. A real finding about the importance of space, territories, and social structure for mice and rats. But not pure overpopulation. The enclosure never reached physical resource limits. Issues stemmed more from uneven crowding, loss of escape options for subordinates, and dominant mice hoarding prime areas. Some analysis suggest it was excessive, unavoidable social interactions, not density alone. That makes sense. Methodological limits, largely observational and subjective. Calhoun used heavy anthropomorphism, juvenile delinquent, barflies, beautiful ones, biblical references like second death, no strong controls, quantitative metrics, stress hormones, or blinding. Possible confounds, inbreeding, depression, small founder population, lab strain, disease buildup. Yeah. In other words, there are a lot of variables that they didn't account for, that they're not, that they don't get associated with the end result that people like to point at. Poor direct analogy to humans. Mice aren't humans. We have culture, technology, institutions, mobility, birth control choices, and far greater adaptability. Declining fertility in developed countries today is better explained by economics, education, women's rights, housings, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. In short, the experiment is real and interesting as a study of rodent social dynamics under artificial constraints, highlighting how environment shapes behavior, but it's not a crystal ball for human civilization's inevitable collapse. That's pop science hype, not rigorous science. Calhoun saw it as a cautionary tale for better planning, not predestination. Yeah, and that's what I would take from it. However, I would add that we're in the end times and sin is coming to an end. Like whatever it is that causes us to behave the way we do, we're in imperfect bodies. We are children of Adam, and God knows the effects that have gone into our bodies, and the effect of knowledge of good and evil that it has had on our societies and our cultures throughout the existence of people on the earth. It took Jesus. It took a man coming and showing how to live according to God's will in order to correct our direction in such a way that, uh, you know, we would stop falling prey to the doom and gloom of, the serpent in this world. Um, you know, he made a way for us to escape, change the course of human history, if you will. You know, the course of humanity was interrupted when Adam and Eve got in trouble with the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the serpent. You know what I mean? And Jesus came in and put a stop to that, changed the course of humanity, and made a way to escape. And I can imagine that, um, working, working in, was a product of the curse, and it affected all of creation, both mankind and animals. So I imagine that things will be drastically different in ways we can't even imagine once he returns and the curse is no more. The earth is returned to its previous, or we get the new heavens and the new earth, whatever that means. And, we're living the way that Adam and Eve were originally designed to live. Things are probably going to be different. So interesting study, but I get what he's saying. Elon's pointing this out as a reason not to be afraid of the future. All right, moving on. How are we doing on time? We should probably look for highlights here. Don't need to look at Grok video stuff. Let's see, if one were to use the term First Nations or Indigenous people or Native Americans in the Americas, that would also apply to English, French, Spanish, and other such people in Europe. More grok stuff. Let's see. Breaking Fox News. He obtained a photo of Austin, Texas mass shooter armed and wearing a sweatshirt that says property of Allah. He has not been identified by authorities. Well, we know who he is now, but multiple federal law enforcement sources say he's 53-year-old naturalized U.S. citizen. See, this is what I expected, and this more of this could happen. You know, like I said, we've got 20 million people in here. We don't know what their intentions are, or how they're going to spend their last days. You know, what involvement they have with the Great Tribulation. See, Cato will classify him as right wing because he's religious inspired jihadist, and Americans because he's naturalized. That's how their vetted terrorist database works. But then they also will be classifying him as net paying immigrant because he won't be taking. Anyway, David says, "Wait, am I still on his timeline? I think I am. All right." If I moved to Japan and lived in Japan for decades, speaking language, integrating into society, contributing to the economy, would I be ethnically Japanese? No. No, I would not. I would never pretend to be, nor would that apply to India, Thailand, Mexico, Denmark, or anywhere. Elon says if ethnicity exists at all, which it obviously does, then English is an ethnicity. This is a simple statement of fact. It is possible to be culturally English or French or Japanese, etc., but ethnically be different. The first is software, the other is hardware. It's a simple way of putting it. This should not be a license to be cruel or unfair to people of a different ethnicity. I believe we should be fair to all ethnicities, but not pretend that one or another does not exist. Exactly. That's from March 1st. March 1st. All right, we'll call it there. Just get today's updates. All right, let us move on to how do we want to do this? We haven't done this in a while.
I created the heavens and the earth, a perfect harmony, a timeless birth. I shaped the stars, I set them free, a world of wonder, a song for me. I formed the man, the dust took flight. I gave the woman a shared delight. Together they stood, my breath, their frame, a mirrored heart, a living flame.
I love that. A living flame. All right. So where are we on the timeline? If you're new here, we are on seal number 5. If you're not new here, we're on seal number 5. Just a quick overview. Let's see. This sign, Revelation 12, occurred on 9/23/2017. It is so rare that it never happens. We've gone through the rarity on this show, looked at every occurrence in the past 5,000 years. This is the only one that matches the description of Revelation 12. A woman appeared in heaven clothed with the sun, meaning the sun was in the constellation, the moon under her feet, in pain to be delivered. Jupiter is in retrograde in her womb for 9 months. So obviously she's in pain to be delivered. And then there were 3 planets in the constellation above her head. Leo normally has 9 stars, but with the 3 planets, it made a crown of 12. So this is the anchor point that told us in 2017 to start watching. And so many people say, oh, you're a date setter. or you're one of those watchmen, as if to say derogatorily. Well, Jesus gave us a lot of information, a lot of details of what was going to happen before he returns, and told us to watch and gave us consequences if we did not watch. So there's no shame in watching. And in fact, in John 14:29, he said, I tell you these things beforehand, so that when they begin to come to pass, you will believe. So there's a purpose in actually paying attention and watching. So this anchor point tells us to start watching. And after this anchor point, if you're reading in the book of Revelation, Revelation 4, a lot of people say it's describing the throne room, which it might be. I've never, I'm not saying that there's only one way to understand, the Revelation as it's written. There's definitely layers. Everybody sees that. Not only are there layers, but there's patterns. We recently did a show on the mirror image, the chiasma, the chiastic structure of the book of Revelation, and that there's lots of reflection, a lot of, in the same way you have a right hand, you also have a left hand, and they're mirror images of each other. God works in mirror images. Creation works in mirror images. Anyway, this describes the legend for how to identify where we are and what to watch for. And basically what it's saying is look for an eclipse that happens in, the particular sections of the sky. And that's exactly what happened. There was an eclipse under the flying eagle that told us about COVID, the rider on the white horse going forth conquering and to conquer. And that's exactly what COVID did, went forth conquering and to conquer. Then so that was December 26, 2019. Then on December 14th, 2020, there was an eclipse in the knee of Ophiuchus, which is the face of a man, which is funny because if you're looking down here at the North Pole, you see the face of a man as one of the living creatures. There was an eclipse in his knee. And this was when the Electoral College declared Joe Biden to be the winner of the presidential election back in 2020. Remember that drama? Normally, they declare the winner on November 6th, 5th or 6th. But this particular year, it took them until December 14th, 2020 to finally declare the winner. And they happened to do it on the day of an eclipse. And this was also the same day that Trump turned over control of Operation Warp Speed, which was the apparatus surrounding the vaccine. And as such, it was the first vaccine that was given. And it was given from so the Biden administration was the one who gave the very first vaccine. And it happened on this day. So the rider on the red horse is seal number 2. And he is given power to take peace, which I believe is the power of the president, because that is power to take peace. And he was given a mighty sword, which was the vaccine, because it was used like a weapon on the entire planet. And the word for sword actually was little dagger. And what's interesting also is this constellation. Not only is it a man, but he's holding a serpent. And the name of this constellation is Serpens, which it represents Asclepios, the ancient god of medicine, which it was known for toxinology and toxicology because it's a snake, obviously. Moving on, let's see. On June 10th, 2021, there was an eclipse in Taurus. This matched the bull right here. So first one was here. First one was underneath Aquila. So this was seal number 1. The next eclipse was under the face of the man. That was seal number 2. Then this one happens on June 10th, 2021, which was when Joe Biden and Boris Johnson signed the new Atlantic Charter at the G7 meeting in Cornwall. And there was an eclipse on that day. They did the elbow bump. There you go. Which is funny. I think it's so cool. This has got to be God's sense of humor that Gemini, the Gemini twins, if you put Joe Biden and Boris Johnson doing the elbow bump, they look like the Gemini twins. A lot of people have an issue with seal number 3 because they're convinced that it's famine. And I submit to you that it is not famine, because the word for, so the rider on the black horse, that's seal number 3. The rider on the black horse is holding in English, it's pair of balances, but the actual Greek word is zugos, which means yoke. This is a yoke. A yoke is used to combine two animals together when they're plowing a field, so you combine their strength. I can understand why they might have translated it pair of balances, because, the old scales that have a yoke and then 2 plates on either side to weigh stuff. And it's the next verse, Revelation 6:6, that says, "And I heard in the midst of the 4 living creatures a measure of wheat for a denarius, 3 measures of barley for a denarius." People think that because that voice uses the word measure, that it's associated with the yoke, which I think it's interesting. I can get where people get that it's like implying famine, but I think a greater argument is that number one, it qualifies it by saying in the midst of the 4 living creatures. In other words, as a result of the 4 global events, I heard a measure of wheat for a denarius and 3 measures of barley. In other words, Revelation 6 is saying that as a result of the events of the first 4 seals, things are going to get expensive. And that's exactly what we saw. COVID shut down the mom and pop shops. It locked people in their homes. It caused people to lose their jobs, remote work, all the things, killed a lot of people. And then the Biden administration came along and used the vaccine as a weapon. You weren't allowed to go anywhere unless you had, the vaccine and 6 booster shots. There were a lot of people who were super, super reluctant, did not even want to get it, but had to because they couldn't fly or they couldn't go do their job. There were people who literally lost their jobs because they refused to get it. It was used as a weapon on the entire planet. This was in every single country across the world. People were required to get that freaking thing. And then, the New Atlantic Charter really supercharged the immigration into the countries. Both of them had, you can see the result of whatever was going through everybody's head who was in charge. You can see it playing out in Europe. It's burning to the ground. Less so in America. I think that the architecture of the 50 United States kind of provided a bit of a buffer to us so that we were able to withstand that chaos. But the seal number 3 was this union, and we've read it on the show before. It's been a long time. You can look it up on the White House website, the New Atlantic Charter. Basically, it combined the strength of our 2 countries. It really did. Basically, we agree on 8 categories, and those 8 categories are pretty much everything. So we're basically combining our strength together, and that's exactly what happened. Is it yoked together? It's one of the more complicated, less obvious seals. Like, we don't really see the obvious impact of that yoking together. Maybe it served to take peace from the earth. That might have been part of it. I'm sure as we research and look into this, we'll understand more and more how it played a role. The New Atlantic Charter. It was important enough for them to fly here and sign it, and get everybody on the same page, probably towards building, the beast system. And then on October 14th, we had another eclipse, and then that was when Israel responded to the Al-Aqsa flood. The Al-Aqsa flood was actually 7 days earlier on October 7th. And that's kind of where we pick up here with our story in Esther. Is October 7th was very comparable to what Haman determined for the Jews. And this is where we're going to pivot into reading. Where we get back over here to my Bible. We're going to pivot into reading the book of Esther. And it's short enough that if you guys don't mind, we could read the whole thing. So the reason we're reading this is because Purim starts tonight, like right now. And Purim is the result of what's written in the book of Esther. Let's see, I see a comment here. Do you think Revelation 12 is not yet complete since part of it, the enormous red dragon, has not appeared? Do you think 3IS? So, yeah, let me tell you about the dragon before we get into Esther. Let's read Revelation 12 so you can see this yourself. So here's the first one. Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then, being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. That was the sign we showed you. So there's another sign after that one. And another sign appeared in heaven. So the fact that it says another sign appeared in heaven means it's not there all the time. At least that's how I understand it. Behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born. She bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, and they should feed her there 1,260 days. So this sign, I believe, did actually happen. And I don't really talk about this one as much, which I probably should. But because it's a sign, it means almost everybody points to Draco, or the constellation Draconis, which is a dragon. The pictograph is a dragon, and they claim that it takes up a third of the stars, which I don't really think it does. Here, let's go look at it. I think it's called Dracon. Dracon constellation. Draco. Yeah, that one right there. Looks like a snake. Let's see. Really? All right, so if you got Ursa Minor here, you got Draco here, between Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. I don't believe it really takes up a third of the stars. Like a third. People, they think it takes up a third of the stars of heaven, and that it casts a tail. Ultimately, the main thing is it is not in the path of the sun, and I think that's the most important thing, is the fact that it's not in the path of the sun. Oh, you know what we could do? We won't. That'll take me too much time. I think I think I could just explain. It's not in the path of the sun, which there's something called the zodiac, or the ecliptic, or the Mazaroth. They're all describing, their words for the same thing. Zodiac, ecliptic, and Mazaroth are all talking about the path of the sun. So the sun goes through 12 different constellations. And that's how we know what month we're in. So depending on which constellation is clothed with the sun determines which month we're in. Because the sky is a clock. The sun, moon, and stars were set for signs, seasons, days, and years. So it's a clock, and it also indicates where we are in the timeline. So there's been if you really want to do an interesting experiment, go ask Grok to give you major events that happened on days of eclipses. You'll get an interesting list, and it's kind of a long list. Like going back thousands of years, interesting things happen on days of eclipses, which just goes to show God uses eclipses to mark important things, which is one of the reasons why I use them once I saw the Revelation 12 sign, to start looking for the seals being opened. Like we knew we were looking for events and we needed to know the start and stop date. That's what the seals provide. Anyway, Draco is not in the ecliptic. The ecliptic has like Taurus. Oh, I can't move this. I was trying to move this around. Like Virgo, Leo, Cancer, Aquarius, Gemini. Right here is Gemini. So you can see like the sun here. The sun moves through this path right here. So Draco is not in the path of the sun. So it cannot be a sign that was there one time and it's that's not there but then is there. You know what I mean? So for that sign to be an actual sign, it has to be in the ecliptic. Well, I say all of that in order to make this point. The only thing that fits the description of a dragon is Cetus that's in the ecliptic. So Cetus is the only thing that can be a sign that appears in heaven. Now, on June 15th, 2022, there was a unique alignment to where all 6 planets, which it's interesting because today there's an alignment of all 6 planets. But if you laid out those oh boy, I got a lot of fun slides in here, don't I? If you laid out those planets, so in Revelation 2 and 3, it talks about the 7 churches. If you take the order of those churches and you line them up with the planets from the sun, so like if you take Mercury and line it up with Ephesus, Venus with Smyrna, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus, and you line it up with the churches, then the good churches are at the head here, and the bad churches are in the tail. So basically, you have Ephesus, which the only thing that they got wrong was they need to return to their first love. Then you got Smyrna, which has nothing to repent from. And then you have Philadelphia, which has nothing to repent from. But then in the tail of the dragon here, you have Pergamos, Thyatira, and Laodicea. These are the bad ones. Pergamos has doctrinal issues. Thyatira has Jezebel issues. And Laodicea is, they're lukewarm. But then you got over here, you got Saturn, which is Sardis, which is the dead church. But what's interesting is 3 of them are in the tail. And I believe so. The stars, the planets were known as wandering stars. So one way you could read that with the his tail drew a third of the stars. So and another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven. Well, you know, first, second, third could be a third of the stars of heaven, which is interesting because this challenges a lot of Christian beliefs. You know, for eons, for as long as I've been alive, people have taught that this sign is when Lucifer was cast out of heaven and he took a third of the angels with him. Oddly enough, it doesn't say that. And it doesn't say that actually anywhere in the Bible. But they assume here that the fiery red dragon is Satan and that his tail is bringing with him a third of the angels in heaven, which people like to quantify, you know, could be millions and trillions of angels. But the sign itself, the only thing that fits this, the description that's written here is Cetus, which an interesting thing about Cetus here is it's restrained. This constellation right here, the 2 fishes, it's actually they're restraining Cetus with a chain. You learn that from looking at older. I don't know if I have any of the pictures in here. Oops. Why? Oh, is that a link? I don't have any of the pictures in here. And one of my slideshows, I actually have a picture of the a really old. It's pretty easy to find if you look in. Cetus pictograph. Nope. Cetus constellation. Cetus constellation artwork, maybe. Here you go. What is the name of that constellation that is restraining Cetus? Pisces. Yeah, let's see if we can. So if you look at this is actually a chain or a rope. I guess in this one it's a rope, but in some of these pictographs, it's actually a chain to where it's like links. You could see the links in here. And so some of the older artwork has Pisces, these two fish, are chaining the dragon, which is an interesting visual imagery when it comes to that particular sign. I think it reinforces the fact that Cetus is probably the great red dragon that's referred to. And then as far as the 7 heads, 10 horns, and stuff like that, there's enough stars in here. You've got like the 7 sisters right here, 10 stars in Taurus when combined with these guys. So I think this is the sign, and it happened on June 15th, 2022. One of the reasons I don't talk about it a whole lot is nothing happened on this day. It's one of those things to where it's just like I couldn't nail down any events that were interesting. It may just be that it's just kind of an indicator of a shift spiritually. Like maybe this is when God's angels, stopped inhibiting the demons. Because I do believe that there are demons, devil spirits, evil spirits in this world. The product of Nephilim. They're disembodied Nephilim. And maybe this is the day that, Michael and Gabriel stopping them from being evil, from possessing people. It may be that whatever happened on this day was unseen, spiritual. It was spiritual and unseen. But one of the reasons I don't talk about it a whole lot is just there's nothing to link to it. It's just, it fits the description. It fits the timeline, which if you look in the timeline over here, it happened. So you've got seal number 1, and then let's see. So seal number 1, seal number 2, seal number 3, and then you have that sign happened. It happened between seal number 3 and seal number 4. So it's like it happened in here somewhere. 2022. But yeah, I don't have anything to link it to. It's just a big fat unknown. If you guys can find anything that happened on June 15th, 2022, let me know. Granted, I didn't do a global search. It could have been, maybe there's something with Iran that's unique with that day. That could be. Anyway, so I think I've sufficiently described the eclipses. The eclipses, are what tell us when one of the seals on the from Revelation 6 were open. So seal number 1 was COVID. Seal number 2 was Biden. Seal number 3 was the New Atlantic Charter. Seal number 4 is 2 parts. The Ayatollahs of flood. This is the part that links us to Esther. Is the Ayatollahs of flood. Number 1, the reason it happened 7 days before the eclipse. I believe this is unsubstantiated. This is a complete and total guess on my part. We have listened to a video of an Israeli intelligence officer talk about this, but and this also links to the abomination of desolation. In October, Israel was surrounded by enemies. This is a fact. This is not disputed. This is a fact that Israel was surrounded by enemies on all sides, which is what Luke 21 says about the abomination. It says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded, know that its desolation is near. And that parallels Matthew 24 that talks about the abomination of desolation. So not only is this the abomination of desolation, but it was intended to completely destroy Jerusalem. It was a combination of Iran, basically Iran's proxies. They were working together in order to wipe Israel off the face of the map. And for whatever reason, Hamas got anxious, and we've covered this on the shows before. On the show, um, if you guys need me to find that video, it was about 2 weeks ago. I could go find the video. Um, Needless to say, Hamas got anxious and they went in early. My guess is they went in 7 days early, and that the plan was for October 14th. Why else would God set it in the stars on October 14th? I mean, it could be for Operation Iron Sword. The intelligence officer said that uh, Iran hadn't completely organized, but they were preparing to attack Israel. But Hamas got impatient for reasons. We've heard different explanations, like it was because of the red heifers. Um, there's a couple of different excuses for why they went in early. Anyway, they went in early, and it was devastating. 1,200 people died, lost their lives. 250 were taken hostage. But it could have been way worse. It was intended to completely destroy Israel, but it didn't. I think that lines up with what we read in Revelation 12. So if you come back here where it talks about the sign, where um, the serpent goes after the woman. Oops. If you come down here a little bit. Now, when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time, times and a half a time from the presence of the serpent. So the serpent spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman. I think this is the Alexa flood. That he might cause her to be carried away by the flood, because that was the intention of the Alexa flood. It was intended to kill Israel, destroy Israel. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. And that seems to be what happened with Hamas. They went in early, and as a result, it was only 1,200 people rather than everybody in Israel. Yeah, so that was the Alexa flood, and then 7 days after that, on the day of the eclipse, is when Israel responded to and went into Gaza to go rescue the 250 that were taken hostage. And it's entirely possible that this was the start of the Gog-Magog war, because it involved Iran, and there was a lot of destruction in Gaza. And when we were reading about Gog-Magog in Ezekiel 38, one of the key factors of the Gog-Magog battle is the destruction. Remember, it's a feast for the animals. If you've seen pictures of Gaza, it was devastated. A lot of fighting over there. A lot of people died as a result of that battle between Israel and Hamas. They were dug in deep, and there was a lot of effort put into retrieving those hostages. Do you remember that? I mean, Hamas was literally like setting up in hospitals and schools, using their own citizens, the Gazans, as meat shields. It was terrible. But in the same way that Haman had to determine to completely kill the Jews, so did Iran. So the serpent did here too. So with that, now let's go back over and start reading Esther. All right. So it starts off here. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. This was the Ahasuerus who reigned over 127 provinces, from India to Ethiopia. In those days, the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, the citadel. that in the 3rd year of his reign he made a feast for all his officials and servants. The powers of Persia and Media, which that should remind you of the lamb, the little horn. That one of the angel that describes the little horn, the horns, the prominent horns are Persia and Media in that vision. The powers of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of the provinces being before him, when he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty for many days, 180 days in all. Geez, that's a lot. And these days were completed. So how long is that? 180 days. That's like a half a year. So 6 months. So let's see, the powers of Persia. Let's see, what was he doing? In the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast. So he made a feast for all of his officials and servants for 6 months. Yikes. So when he showed his riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty for many days, 180 days in all. Wow, that's one hell of a part. That is one hell of a feast. And when these days were completed, the king made a feast lasting 7 days for all the people who were present in Shushan, the citadel, from great to small in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white and blue linen curtains. Blue blue and purple were colors that indicated richness, like abundance, because they were hard to come by, especially purple. Curtains fastened with cords of fine linen and purple on silver rods and marble pillars. And the couches were of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of alabaster, turquoise, and white and black marble. So this place was gorgeous and rich. And they served drinks in golden vessels, each vessel being different from the other, with royal wine in abundance, according to the generosity of the king, in accordance with the law, which this is going to be a key thing here. The law is very important throughout the book of Esther, and we're going to talk a lot about it. And drinking was not compulsory. In other words, you're here to party, but you don't have to get drunk. For so the king had ordered all the officers of his household that they should do according to each man's pleasure. Party if you want to, but know that you're under no obligation. So that's the scene here. Is basically he's showing off his riches, and he is rich. His kingdom covers 127 provinces, Persia and Media, from India to Ethiopia. So big landmass. He's the king over a lot. So he's rich. And he's showing it. I mean, like, how rich do you have to be to throw a party for 6 months? Anyway, so this is another party lasting a week. And you weren't required to drink. But this is where we get into Queen Vashti. Queen Vashti also made a feast for the women in the royal palace, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry, so basically the last day of his feast, he's drunk, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, 7 eunuchs, who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king, wearing her royal crown in order to show her beauty to the people and the officials, for she was beautiful to behold. So he's got a bunch of his friends there, and he wants to show off his queen, show his friends how beautiful she is. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command brought by his eunuchs. Therefore, the king was furious, and his anger burned within him. Now, you might be tempted to wonder, why is this a big deal? Number one, why would she refuse to come, show the king's friends how beautiful she is? And number two, why would the king be so darn angry that she refused to come? I want to foreshadow the events of Esther, had this not happened, the Jewish people would not have been saved. So you could read into this a little that this might have been a spiritual situation to where God was working in this situation, or at least knew this situation was going to happen, and used it in order to place Esther in the kingdom of Ahasuerus. So let's move on from here. Then the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for this was the king's manner towards all who knew law and justice. This king loved his law, and he enforced it relentlessly. Those closest to him being Karshina, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marcina, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media. See how this is related with Iran, because that's the area, Persia and Media over there. The 7 princes of Persia and Media who had access to the king's presence, which this was that was not everybody had access to the king during his reign. We'll learn more about that later in the story. And who ranked highest in the kingdom. What shall we do with Queen Vashti? According to law, because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus brought to her by the eunuchs. In other words, there's some punishment that needs to be handled because she broke the law. And Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also all the princes and all the people who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will become known to all women, so that they will despise their husbands in their eyes when they report. King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in before him, but she did not come. This very day the noble ladies of Persia and Media will say to all the king's officials that they have heard of this behavior of the queen. In other words, this guy is making an argument that she set a precedent that women don't have to obey their husbands in his land, which I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the too long didn't read of the situation. Thus there will be excessive contempt and wrath. You have to remember this is a different culture than our culture. The feminist movement hadn't happened. This is more allowed in our culture, but when you're reading about cultures that existed thousands of years ago, you have to be mindful that their culture was completely different from ours. This was not something that was allowed. There will be excessive contempt and wrath. If it pleases the king, let a royal decree go out from him, and let it be recorded into the laws of Persians and Medes, so that it will not be altered, that Vashti shall come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. When the king's decree, which he will make, is proclaimed throughout all the empire, for it is great, kind of like a Trump moment there, for it is great, a great empire. All wives will honor their husbands, both great and small. And the reply pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. Then he sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province in its own script, and to every people in their own language, that each man should be the master in his own house and speak in the language of his own people. Interesting. Yeah. Each man should be the master of his own house. Fair enough, right? I mean, that's still even biblical. The man is the head of the house. Again, we're in a different culture in America. Other cultures around the world still have a similar setting. This is more of a Eastern culture, to where it's in some places it is enforced by severe consequences, to say the least. All right, moving on. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus subsided, he remembered Vashti, what she had done, and what had been decreed against her. Remember, he was drunk a lot of the time. 6-month party. Drinking is optional. I'm sure he did his fair share of drinking, but here he is. He remembered Vashti, what she had done, and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's servants who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather all the beautiful young virgins to Shushan the citadel, into the women's quarters, under the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, custodian of the women, and let beautiful preparations be given to them. Then let the young woman who pleases the king, be queen instead of Vashti." This thing pleased the king, and he did so. In Shushan the citadel there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives who had been captured with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And Mordecai brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter. For she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and beautiful. When her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. Okay, so we're setting the scene here. Beautiful young virgin, Uncle Mordecai, in the kingdom ruled by Ahasuerus, who's now looking for a queen. So it was when the king's command and decree were heard, and when many young women were gathered at Shushan the citadel, under the custody of Haggai, that Esther also was taken to the king's palace, into the care of Haggai, the custodian of the women. Now the young woman pleased him, and she obtained his favor. So he readily gave beauty preparations to her, besides her allowance. Then 7 choice maidservants were provided for her from the king's palace, and he moved her and her maidservants to the best place in the house of the women. Esther had not revealed her people or family, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it. And every day Mordecai paced in front of the court of the women's quarters to learn of Esther's welfare and what was happening to her. Each young woman's turn came to go into King Ahasuerus after she completed 12 months of preparations. Man, they do things. It takes time. They do things, and I mean, he really likes quality, right? You know, a 6-month feast, 12-month preparation to meet your next queen. Yikes. According to the regulations for the women, for thus were the days of their preparation apportioned: 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with perfume and preparations for beautifying women. You know, with preparations being this strict, you know, it may have been an unreasonable request that the king Ahasuerus was making of Queen Vashti. Um, you know, just to show her off. That way, I mean, like, maybe she wasn't prepared. If they were used to this kind of preparation. Anyway, that's just speculation. 6 months of oil with 6 months with oil of myrrh, 6 months with perfumes and preparations for beautifying women. Thus prepared, each woman went to the king, and she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the women's quarters to the king's palace. In the evening she went, and in the morning she returned to the second house of the women, to the custody of Shashgaz, the king's eunuch who kept the concubines. She would not go in to the king again unless the king delighted in her and called for her by name. Now, when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter, just a reminder of who she is, to go into the king, she requested nothing but what Haggai, the king's eunuch, the custodian of the women, advised. That's good advice right there. If you're doing something, preparing for something, and you're not sure what to do or how to behave, talk to somebody. Talk to the assistant. Ask the assistant what they would recommend. There's a lot of people over prepare. A lot of people, do things. So this shows that Esther was wise, had some wisdom. Probably wanted to know what the king liked in order to get his attention. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast, the feast of Esther, for all his officials and servants, and he proclaimed a holiday in the province and gave gifts according to the generosity of a king, which we know from the beginning of the story just how generous that is. The last party lasted, second to last party lasted 6 months, and then it lasted 7 days. So, dude's pretty rich. When virgins were gathered together a second time, Mordecai sat with the king's gate. Now Esther had not revealed her family and her people, just as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther obeyed the command of Mordecai, as when she was brought up by him. In those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gate, 2 of the king's eunuchs, Bigtha and Teresh, doorkeepers, became furious and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. So the matter became known to Mordecai, who told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And when an inquiry was made into the matter, it was confirmed, and both were hanged on a gallows. In other words, 2 of the eunuchs wanted to kill the king. Mordecai found out, told Esther, who told the king, who credited Mordecai, and then had those 2 who wanted to kill him hanged. And it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. So they recorded it, which is important for later on. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman. This is our villain, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. And all the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman. Haman was the deep state in this case. Haman was the reason bad stuff was attributed to the king. So we'll see. For so the king had commanded concerning him, but Mordecai would not bow or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were within the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" Now it happened, when they spoke to him daily, that he would not listen to them, that they told it to Haman to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay homage, Haman was filled with wrath. This is a theme throughout the Bible, about bowing or paying homage to, this is one of the things about the 7 churches, one of the common things about the 7 churches that are talked about in the book of Revelation, is during the time that they formed, there was a general requirement to declare Caesar as God. The Jews were given a special exception to not have to pay that tribute, because they served a different god, and they were allowed to do that. It's interesting that this is... So you can imagine that Haman was probably pretty pissed that the Jews were special in this regards, because he did not bow or pay homage, or pay him homage. Actually, he was pissed because he didn't bow to Haman. That's a narcissist tendency right there. Haman thinks he's the shit, and because Mordecai won't acknowledge it, he gets mad at him. He was filled with wrath. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. That's kind of extreme. You know, Haman being a narcissist, thinking he's next to God, basically, because somebody won't bow to you, all you and all your people should die. It's kind of extreme. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, that is the lot. That's going to be important for Purim. Pur. Before Haman to determine the day and the month until it fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, which we just came out of, I believe. I believe February is Adar. Correct me if I'm wrong. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all other peoples, and they do not keep the king's laws. Remember I said laws were going to be important later on? Well, the Jews don't bow because they only serve one God. This is a theme with the Jews throughout history, is they only serve one God. This is why they're considered a stubborn, stiff-necked people also, which is a good thing in some regards. It's a good thing and a bad thing to be stubborn and stiff-necked. The good thing is they refuse to bow. The bad thing is it heaped consequences on them in a lot of situations throughout the scripture. Therefore, it is not fitting for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they should be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work, to bring it into the king's treasuries. So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the money and the people are given to you to do with them as seems good to you. This seems comparable to the October 7th flood, to where Haman represents Iran. And this is what you're seeing a lot of, like the Jewish people are now saying that, why there's an association with Purim and with Gog Magog is because of the association with Haman, because the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was from the bloodline of Haman, if I'm not mistaken. So he took the king's signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the money and the people are given to you to do with them as seems good to you. Then the king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and a decree was written according to all that Haman commanded, to the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, remember there's 127 provinces, so that's a lot, to the officials of all people, to every province according to its script, and to every people in their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus it was written and sealed with the king's signet ring. And the letters were sent by courier into... I wonder if there's a link here between, the sealed scroll from when Haman had intended to destroy the Jews and the scroll that's being opened today, the visual imagery of the scroll sealed with 7 seals. I wonder if there's not some kind of like an association, because in Zechariah it says that the scroll was written on both sides and it's written with the thieves on one side and the perjurers on another side, and it goes through all the land and goes into their home and burns them to the ground. Anyway, maybe not. And the letters were sent by courier into all the king's provinces to destroy and kill and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day. So they were planning basically the purge. They're planning the Jewish purge. Have you seen that? Have you seen about that movie? It's like the premise of the movie is violence. The people were becoming so violent that in order to gain peace, they decided there would be one day of violence that people could kill anybody without any consequences. I wonder if they got the idea for that movie from Esther, because Haman had determined on one day to kill and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. A copy of the document was to be issued as law in every province, being published for all people, that they should be ready for that day. The couriers went out, hastened by the king's command, and the decree was proclaimed in Shushan the citadel. So the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. So you can see the comparison with what Haman was planning for the Jewish people and what the Ayatollah was planning for the Jewish people. It's Haman 2.0, October 7th. Meanwhile, when Mordecai learned all that had happened, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city. He cried out with a loud voice, loud and bitter cry. He went as far as the front of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province where the king's command and decree arrived, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Can you imagine? Like, can you imagine living in the United States that, like, somebody. I could see this happening in the Biden administration. So, can you imagine living in the Biden administration? Some some intern, some deep state intern uses the auto pen to decree that all Christians are to be killed on a particular day, signs it as an executive order, and it gets broadcast out to where it says, pretty much your time on this earth is limited. You're all going to die on this particular day. That's kind of what happened here. And in every province where the king's command and decree arrived, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Yikes. So Esther's maid and eunuch came and told her, and the queen was deeply distressed. Then she set garments to clothe Mordecai and take his sackcloth away from him, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, whom he had appointed to attend her, and she gave him a command concerning Mordecai, to learn what and why this was. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the city square that was in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries to destroy the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the written decree for their destruction, which was given at Shushan, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and that he might command her to go into the king to make supplication to him and plead before him for her people. So Hathach returned and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a command for Mordecai. All the king's servants and all the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court of the king who has not been called, he has but one law: put all to death except the one whom the king holds out the golden scepter. So basically, Mordecai asked Esther to go plead for the people of the Jewish people, her people, plead for her own life. But she's saying there's a law that anyone who dares go into the court who has not been called can be put to death, unless the king puts out his golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I myself have not been called to go into the king these 30 days. In other words, she's risking her life to do this. So they told Mordecai Esther's words, and Mordecai told them to answer Esther, do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. Yeah, because the auto pen had been signed. The king, he can't even stop it. The auto pen letter has already gone out. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet, who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Basically, he's reminded her, look, you're in a position of power and strength. You have the opportunity to do something. Yes, there's a risk, but don't think that you'll escape the purge. Maybe God put you in the king's house for such a time as this. Remember, I said at the very beginning, it's interesting that all Vashti did was refuse to go show off her beauty to the king, and she was replaced. For whatever reason, God used that situation to install Esther, probably knowing that she would be needed to save the Jewish people. We've seen a lot of miracles like this in the last, everything that's gone on and happened. Like, can you imagine if Trump had never been elected? Clearly God intended for him to be president for such a time as this. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther commanded him. Now it happened on the 3rd day that Esther put all of her royal robes and stood in the inner courts of the king's palace, across from the king's house, while the king sat on his royal throne in the royal house, facing the entrance of the house. So it was, when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, that she found favor in his sight, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther went near and touched the top of the scepter. And the king said to her, so basically, risk number 1 completed, demolished. She didn't die. He held out his scepter. She gets to live. And the king said to her, what do you wish? Queen Esther, what is your request? It shall be given to you up to half the kingdom. It's pretty generous. So Esther answered, this is the story of Esther here. There's a lot of wisdom to be learned. A lot of people like to vomit information. She was very careful with sharing information. Number 1, she didn't tell people she was Jewish. And number 2, when she completed the first challenge of not dying by going into the king's royal courtroom, she didn't just vomit information. We're going to see that she was quite wise in how she handled this. So Esther answered, if it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come to a banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, bring Haman quickly, that he may do as Esther has said. So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther had prepared, at the banquet of wine. So basically, she just said, why don't we have drinks tonight? Bring your friend Haman. At the banquet of wine, the king said to Esther, what is your petition? It shall be granted you. What is your request? Up to half the kingdom. It shall be done. So basically, he's still offering, and I'm sure there's some precedence here, and that's probably the reason why, if you were to go into the courtroom having not been called, there may have been a law that you were allowed to ask for something. So by, extending the golden scepter, he's allowing her to make her request. So that request is a really big deal. And she's not squandering the opportunity. So her first request was, let's have drinks with you and Haman at a banquet that I'll prepare tonight. She probably was unsure what to do at this point. God was probably working in her to stall a little bit so that he can get things situated. I kind of see that with what happened with like the election. You know, by Donald Trump constantly saying that the election had been stolen, it really planted the seeds for the Trump derangement syndrome with some people, making fun of him, you know, stuff like that. I see this similar thing happen throughout. I've seen it happen throughout the decades, where, and even in my own life, where, you know, you're approaching a situation, you don't know exactly what to do, so you do the best you can for that moment, and you know, if things don't work out, you don't give up hope and stop trying. You know, you come back, you reevaluate, and then you go back at it, and then you realize that things happened exactly the way they needed to happen. It's really a good exercise in trusting God. Anyway, at the banquet of wine, the king said to Esther, "What is your petition? It shall be granted you. What is your request? Up to half the kingdom, it shall be done." Then Esther answered and said, "My petition and request is this, that if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, then let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said." In other words, we've had drinks tonight, but I want for the request that I have, I'm not ready to make the requests. Let's do another banquet tomorrow, and then I'll do as you've said. I'll let you know my requests. So this is where Haman starts to his narcissistic mentality really starts to take hold and work against him. So Haman went out that day joyful and with a glad heart. Yeah, he's been drinking. And when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand or tremble before him, such a narcissistic, demanding worship mentality, he was filled with indignation against Mordecai. Kind of makes you wonder how much of that influences our world today. You know, how much of our world is influenced by people who are jealous and angry because you won't bow down. I see this with false prophets a lot, to where I almost wonder if it's not a narcissistic mentality or even a narcissistic spirit in a false prophet that makes them use, they basically lie, and that they use language like "I had a dream," or "I'm getting a vision," or "I'm receiving information," or "I spoke to Jesus," or "I had a conversation with God, and he told me X, Y, and Z." It's almost as if they do that because in doing so, it causes people to look at them in a position of authority, right? To look at them as though they are the anointed. One of the first things that Jesus warned about on the Mount of Olives, when his disciples asked him, you know, what signs will there be when you're about to return? One of them was that he said is, "Do not be deceived, for many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ." And I truly believe that that is him warning against people coming in the name of Jesus, claiming to speak on his behalf. Because to come in somebody's name, that's the language of agency, like an ambassador, right? When you come in somebody's name, you come in their authority. In other words, there's going to be a lot of people claiming the authority of Jesus, deceiving people. And one of the common themes is do not be deceived, for many false prophets will rise up during this time. And we see a lot of that. We see a lot of false prophets that are making claims. And that's one of the big things about the Great Tribulation. Remember, we read in Matthew 24, right here. Then if anyone's, so in the day, so for then there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Then, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, look, he's in the desert, do not go out. Or look, he's in the inner room, do not believe it. So that's a part of today. Like if we're in this great tribulation, this is something that we need to expect. I almost wonder if it's not like a narcissistic spirit that's causing those people to say those things. I mean, Jesus outright is telling you people are going to lie to you. They're going to tell you, look, here's the Christ, or they're going to be making claims that a certain person is the Christ. Do not believe it, for false Christs and false prophets will shine. They're going to show signs and wonders to deceive, probably with AI. If possible, even the elect. Therefore, if they say, look, he's in the desert, do not go out. Or look, he's in the inner room, do not believe it. So Haman went out that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gates, and that he did not stand or tremble before him, he was filled with indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and called for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Then Haman told them of his great riches. Of course. Of course he starts off. Look how rich I am. Such a narcissist. Then Haman told them of his great riches, the multitude of his children, everything in which the king had promoted him, and how he advanced him above the officials and servants of the kings. That's such like a keeping up with the Joneses kind of, look at my car, look at my house, look how many children I have, look at what the king has done. You get that sense of Lucifer, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? You know, all the jewels were your covering. You see that mentality here in Haman. Very narcissistic. Moreover, Haman said, besides, Queen Esther, besides, Queen Esther invited no one but me to come in with the king to the banquet that she prepared, and tomorrow I am again invited by her. Boy, he's feeling super special. Along with the king, yet all of this avails me nothing so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. He is so pissed at Mordecai. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, let gallows be made 50 cubits high, and in the morning suggest to the king that Mordecai be hanged on it. Then go merrily with the king to the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, so that he had the gallows made. That was a dumb mistake. Here we go in 6. That night the king could not sleep, so one was commanded to bring the book of the records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigtha and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs, the doorkeepers, who sought to lay hands on the king Ahasuerus. Then the king said, what honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? So in other words, flashback from when Mordecai saved the king's life, and it was written down in the Chronicles. God delayed Esther from making the request to save the Jewish people so that he had time to set up this situation. Haman was lifted up in his heart so that he made dumb choices by making a gallows, and the king remembered what Mordecai did. He remembered the value that Mordecai had to him, and now he's wondering how he should repay Mordecai for what he did. This dude's rich. He wants to bless people. This is clearly a thing with Ahasuerus. He wanted to bless people. What honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? And the king's servants who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. So the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to suggest the king hang Mordecai on the gallows that he prepared for him. Dummy. The king's servant said to him, Haman is there, standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king asked him, what shall be done for the man who the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, this is such a narcissist thing, who would the king delight to honor more than me? That's the serpent. That spirit of narcissism. Also, you could even argue that that is the same spirit of the man of sin, the son of perdition. One of my arguments that is not referring to a literal man, but it's a mentality or a doctrine, it's a mentality of narcissism. In 2 Thessalonians 2, The man of sin, the son of perdition, sits in the temple of God as God, showing himself that he is God. That is the perfect description of a narcissist, and that's what Haman is doing here. Who would the king like to delight more than me? You know what I mean? Whom would the king delight to honor more than me? And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought to the king, which the king has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, which has a royal crest placed on its head. Then let this robe and horse be delivered to the hand of the one of the king's most noble princes, that he may array the man whom the king delights to honor. Then parade him on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Boy, he had quite the list of things to do to honor, ready to go there, thinking it was going to be done to himself. Then the king said to Haman, hurry, take the robe, the horse, as you suggested, and do so for Mordecai, the Jew, who sits within the king's gate. Leave nothing undone of all that you have spoken. That must have really irked Haman. So Haman took the robe and the horse, arrayed Mordecai, and led him on horseback through the city square, and proclaimed before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Afterward, Mordecai went back to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house, mourning and with his head covered, when Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs came and hastened to bring Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. Dun, dun, dun. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther. And on the second day, at the banquet of wine, the king again said to Esther, what is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Up to half of the kingdom it shall be done. Then Queen Esther answered and said, if I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my requests. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. This is what happened with the Jews on October 7th. They had been sold to be killed, destroyed, and annihilated. Had we been sold as male and female slaves, I would have held my tongue, although the enemy could never compensate for the king's loss. So King Ahasuerus answered and said, Queen Esther, who is he, and where is he, who would dare presume in his heart to do such a thing? And Esther said, the adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. So Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. Then the king arose in his wrath. You can see the justice coming. This is kind of what it felt like when this weekend, when we went into Iran to take out Haman. So Haman was terrified before the king and queen. And the king arose in his wrath from the banquet of wine and went into the palace garden. But Haman stood before Queen Esther, pleading for his life, for he saw the evil was determined against him by the king. And not really evil, just that his days were just more like judgment was determined against him for the things which he had done against God's people. This is why you don't mess with God's people. When the king returned from the palace garden to the place of the banquet of wine, Haman had fallen across the couch where Esther was. Boy, Haman just cannot win. Then the king said, will he also assault the queen while I'm in the house? Not a good look for Haman. As the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Now Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said to the king, look, the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on the king's behalf, is standing at the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath subsided. Uh, that's October 7th backfired on Iran. It was terrible for the Jewish people, make no mistake, but it indeed backfired and ultimately resulted in their own demise. Likewise, Haman, who intended evil against God's people, his chosen people, who are stubborn and stiff necked, but still the ones he loves, backfired. On that day, King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came before the king. For Esther had told how he was related to her. So the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman. Excuse me. Now Esther spoke again to the king, fell down at his feet, and implored him with tears to counteract the evil of Haman the Agagite, and the scheme which he had devised against the Jews. And the king held out the golden scepter towards Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king and said, if it pleases the king, and if so, this is the second time she's gone in and risked her life. It kind of goes unsaid here, but she did the same thing to where she went into the king having not been called. He could have had her killed, but instead he held out the golden scepter, which why not, Mordecai saved the king's life, and they rooted out this evil Haman who had intended to kill the Jews in his kingdom, whom the king delights to honor. And the king held out the golden scepter towards Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king and said, if it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seems right to the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman. Cancel the auto pen. Trump did that. The son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to annihilate the Jews who are all in the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that will come to my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my countrymen? Then King Ahasuerus said to the queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew, indeed, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the gallows because he tried to lay his hands on the Jews. You yourselves write a decree concerning the Jews as you please, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For whatever is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's signet ring, no one can revoke. So the king's scribes were called at that time in the 3rd month, and in the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day. And it was written, according to all that Mordecai commanded, to the Jews, to the satraps, the governors, and the princes of the provinces, from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces in all, to every province in its own script, to every people in their own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. And he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed it with the king's signet ring, and sent letters by couriers on horseback, riding on royal horses, bred from swift steeds. That's an interesting note. Riding on royal horses that were really fast, bred from swift steeds. By these letters, the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them, both little children and women, and to plunder their possessions on one day in all the province of King Ahasuerus. So basically, on the day of the purge, you're allowed to fight back. On one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province and published for all people, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers, who rode on royal horses, went out, hastened, and pressed on by the king's command, and the decree was issued in Shushan the citadel. So Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in the royal apparel of blue and white, with a great crown of gold and garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness, joy and honor, and in every province and city, wherever the king's command and decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a holiday. Then many of the people of the land became Jews, because fear of the Jews fell upon them. That might be a sign of the end times here. The Jews are God's chosen people. Make no mistake, it's very clear. Jesus was a Jew, so you're claiming to become like Jesus. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, on the 13th day, the time came for the king's command and his decree to be executed. So now we're getting into... So we had October 7th, where it was determined to kill the Jews. It was determined to destroy Israel. That didn't go as planned. And the plan backfired. And part of the backfire is that the king's command was you're allowed to defend yourself and you're allowed to fight back and kill the oppressors. I almost wonder if that's not part of the Great Tribulation, because right now it's a strategic targeted attack. I'm wondering what comes next. Is there a day, because in the scripture in Thessalonians it says, for when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction. I'm almost wondering, with the way that this attack with Iran has gone down, if it's not going to kind of wind down to where they say peace and safety, and then there's not some kind of an attack. Like, is there a day that has been written by the king's command? So like maybe the Ayatollah. Has the Ayatollah set a day? In the same way that Haman set a day to kill the Jews, has there been a day set where death and destruction is determined, and because Esther found favor in the king's sight, they're allowed to fight back to where that day is going to backfire? That's the Gog-Magog war. Gog-Magog is intended to kill and destroy the Jews, and it backfires. Big time, bigly, like Donald Trump likes to say. Backfires bigly. I don't know if that's the case, but it's Purim now. We're going into Purim right now. And I wonder if that's not what makes it part of the Great Tribulation. Because remember, it's a sacrifice. So now in the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, on the 13th day, the time came for the king's command and his decree to be executed. On the day that the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, the opposite occurred. I need to highlight that. And that the Jews themselves overpowered those who hated them. The Jews gathered together in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their harm. And no one could withstand them, because fear of them fell upon all the people. And all the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and all those doing the king's work helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's palace, and his fame spread throughout all the province. For this man, Mordecai, became increasingly prominent. I imagine that people had Mordecai derangement syndrome. He became great. He was great. Became increasingly prominent. Thus the Jews defeated all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, with slaughter and destruction, and did what they pleased with those who hated them. And in Shushan, the citadel, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. Also Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Paratha, Adalia, Aridtha, Parmashta, Arisai, Aradai, and Vajetha. Vajetha. The 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha. So we've taken out the Ayatollah. My question is, what about his 10 sons? The enemy of the Jews they killed, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. On that day, the number of those who were killed in Shushan the citadel was brought to the king, and the king said to Queen Esther, "The Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the citadel. And the 10 sons of Haman, what have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your petition? It shall be granted to you. Or what is your further request? It shall be done." Then Esther said, "If it pleases the king, let it be granted to the Jews who are in Shushan to do again tomorrow according to today's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows." We need a purge too. So the king commanded this to be done. The decree was issued in Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. And the Jews who were in Shushan gathered together again on the 14th day of the month of Adar and killed 300 men at Shushan. But they did not lay a hand on the plunder. Seems to be a theme. The remainder of the Jews in the king's provinces the remainder of the Jews in the king's provinces gathered together and protected their lives, had rest from their enemies, and killed 25,000 of their enemies, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. So this is what makes me think that, this war in Iran's not done. Which, I mean, because I still don't think we've seen anything that qualifies as the Great Tribulation yet. Now, that might be coming with the interruption of supply chain and logistics just because of our just-in-time delivery system. Or the grocery stores could, with the increase in price from fuel, that's going to make groceries get expensive and maybe even stop filling the grocery store. That could cause some Great Tribulation. But Ezekiel 38 and 39, there's some pretty big enemies to be killed. And here they killed 75,000 of their enemies, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. This was on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th of the month they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Yeah, 75,000. Did I say 25,000? I may have said 25,000 initially. All right, so here's where we get to the Feast of Purim. But the Jews who were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day, as well as on the 14th, and on the 15th of the month they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages who dwelt in the unwalled towns, this is a link to Ezekiel 38 and 39, how the unwalled towns celebrated the 14th day of the month of Adar with gladness and feasting as a holiday, and for sending presents to one another. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters to all the Jews near and far, who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, to establish among them that they should celebrate yearly the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar, as the days on which the Jews had rest from their enemies, as the month which was turned from sorrow to joy for them, and from mourning to a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, of sending presents to one another and gifts to the poor. It's interesting, sending gifts to one another. That's the same thing that happens when the two witnesses are killed. All those who were tormented sent gifts to one another. Seems to be a theme. So the Jews accepted the custom which they had begun, as Mordecai had written to them, because Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to annihilate them, and had cast that is the lot, to consume them and destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letter that this wicked Haman this wicked plot which Haman had devised against the Jews should return on his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. So they called these days Purim, after the name Pur. Therefore, because all the words of this letter, what they had seen concerning this matter, and what had happened to them, the Jews established and opposed it upon themselves and their descendants, and all who would join them, that without fail they should celebrate these 2 days every year, according to the written instructions and according to the prescribed time, that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, that these days of Purim should not fail to be observed among the Jews, and that the memory of them should not perish among their descendants. Then Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter about Purim. And Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim at their appointed time, as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had prescribed for them, and as they decreed for themselves and their descendants concerning matters of their fasting and lamenting. So the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. And King Ahasuerus imposed tribute on the lands and on the islands of the sea. Know all the acts of his power and his might, and the account of greatness of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him, and are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was second to King Ahasuerus, and was great among the Jews, and well received by the multitude of his brethren, seeking the good of his people and speaking peace to all his countrymen. There you go. That is the entire book of Esther. Would that take us? About 49 minutes? That's not bad. That's not bad. That's about the length of the Torment report. I haven't been reading chat this whole time. You guys say anything interesting? My nose is all stuffy. All right. Is there any questions? Anybody have any questions or comments? There's no evidence for him descending from Haman, but he claimed to be descended from Muhammad. Oh, I was just taking Tovia at his word that the Ayatollah was descended from Haman. Did I? You heard that too when we listened to Tovia. It was just like Thursday. We listened to Tovia talk about the Ayatollah. We are in Adar, which is late February, late March. No evidence. Okay. He's also not Persian. Huh. You have to keep telling Grok that self-proclaimed prophets are not real prophets because Grok is really impressed by them. I worry about Grok. I like Grok better than all the other models, but I do worry about it. You couldn't have chosen a more fitting subject than Esther for this time. Thank you. I know. I mean, like that's where the whole festival is decreed and set in motion. Sundown today to sundown tomorrow in most places is Purim. Sundown tomorrow to sundown the day after is also Purim in Jerusalem. Cool. Alrighty. Well, you guys want to see a little bit more of this tool that I spent the waste of my weekend on. So this is the intelligence tool. You got the globe here, but then there's like a massive amount of data layers So I can show all the aircraft that are currently in the world. Turn off clustering. So we can actually see all the aircraft that are in the air, which Monkey Works, I need to add some color to differentiate the different type of aircraft. Monkey Works actually bases his show off of a similar platform to where this is how he's able to actually like track the he was able to track when they were bringing there's a lot of aircraft in the air right now. Is that really how many airplanes are? Let me turn on the live updates. Is that really how many aircraft are in the air right now? That seems like a lot. How many is that? 46,000 aircraft in the air right now. I may have to double check that. That seems like a lot. Could be true. But this is what MonkeyWorks uses on his channel. It's the same data source that he uses for these airplanes. Yeah, wow. We can turn on satellites. Ooh, look at that one way out there. The Proxima 2 satellite. Isn't that interesting? We can turn on the satellites. We can turn on ships. See where all the ships are in the world. Not as many as the airplanes. And this is not a complete source of the ships. 22,000 ships we can look at. But the really cool thing. So anyway, there's you can also do like fires and disasters. So like earthquakes. Obviously, we'll earthquakes. That's not right. There's more than 5 earthquakes. Huh. I think the data source I got for earthquakes might be missing some information. Fire zones, fires, events, weather. Oops. You can see all the fires. There's a lot of fires in the central U.S. right now. Fire name Island, 77 acres, 0% contained. So we got all those. And then we got like Intel. There's a national event database that you can like pull data from, which is really interesting. And it's not working right now. Why are you not working? I'll have to fix that one. That does maybe it's in the OSINT feed. It does these kind of things. So like I have this feed of like there's this API looks for like political, let's see, what is it? Security events, military events, protests, political things, diplomacy, and they curate these lists that you can pull. And it's linked to this GDELT database too. So it's basically a way of just like identifying uprisings, which is interesting. Threat map. This is like where all the conflicts are right now. uh, what else do we have on here? We can look at the Navy ships, military bases, cyber threats. These are cyber attacks that are actively happening right now. Malware downloaded. A lot of malware stuff. These are reported in a database somewhere, and I'm just pulling that feed. I got emergency stuff, police and fire, ham radio, police stations, medical. This is the one that's really cool, the cameras. This is where you really see it shine. So there's like, how many? There's like thousands, 40,000, 41,000 cameras that are available right now. So like you can, a lot of them are like traffic cams because I pull it from a public camera source called windy.com. Oop, that one's down for construction. There you go. So you can pull in camera feeds all over the world. So, like, if I want to see what's going on in Israel right now, you can type in Israel. Then I can look at the manual. These are manual feeds I had to add. Where are they? Here they are. These are manual feeds I had to add because there's not a lot of published feeds in Israel or Iran. I've been scouring the internet looking for them. I've been finding them. This is one in Nablus. This is the combined one. No, that's not the combined one. There's one that's like being broadcast on YouTube. What did I do with that guy? There's some malware attacks in Israel being reported. Some beach pictures. Pretty cool, huh? I did this over the weekend. I don't know if it's a good use of my time, but I want to be able to use this as a tool. So the next thing I'm going to do is there's more data sources I want to add. I'm going to add in the next thing is to actually add AI in here to get kind of like something you'd see in Hollywood, to where it's just like highlight important things that we should be paying attention to, because I want to start seeing, for the channel, for things that are going on, so that we can report to you like what's going on. Just like this right here, if you want to see what's going on in Israel right now. These are live feeds of Israel, so I don't see any missiles hitting Israel right now. This one's not live, it's just updated from periodically. There you go. It takes a snapshot like every 15 seconds. But there you go, pretty cool. So those are some exciting things coming. We have a new intelligence platform, which will hopefully give us an advantage to be able to kind of see things exactly when they happen, maybe even before people realize it, and also be able to like correlate data to where like we'll be able to see fires and earthquakes, and all kinds of weird events happening, maybe before others even realize it. Pretty cool, huh? All right. What else? So here we are. Pretty sure we're in seal number 5. The eclipse that happened on February 17th. I think it was just marked. So the thing that was different about seal number 5, the first 4 seals had horses associated with them, and riders. You had the rider on the white horse, rider on the black horse, rider on the red horse, and rider on the green horse, which was death followed by hell. So technically 2 riders or 2 horses. Doesn't say. 1 horse, 2 riders, 2 subjects. So you had the rider on the green horse. Well, the seal number 5, there's no riders, no horses, and there's no living creatures calling attention to the events of those days. So what I liken that to is that there's those first 4 seals were like publicly available global events that had a global impact. Seal number 5 had no horse associated with it, which the first 4 seals, the horses, the best I can understand, comes from Zechariah 5, that talks about the horses that go to and fro, up and down in the earth, and they have an effect on the earth, which seems to imply that they're spirits that have a global impact. Maybe they're angels. Actually, they're called spirits. I think they're actually defined. They're said these are the spirits that go to and fro in the earth and up and down in it. So, according to Zechariah, they're the spirits that have a global impact. So, seal number 5, there's no horse associated with it. So, it may have just been that the seal was marking a transition from seal number 4, death followed by hell, to judgment. Know what I mean? Like, maybe it's and this is just speculation, just because there's no horse, there's no living creature. So the living creatures seem to be constellations associated with an eclipse, to where when the eclipse happened in the section of sky of the constellation, it's in essence saying, come and see. In other words, drawing attention to the event of that day. But seal number 5, it's all about the martyrs under the altar saying, how much longer, Lord? It's like, there's this idea of impatience waiting for judgment. And that's exactly where we find ourselves. We're waiting for judgments. And this thing with Iran, the attack with Iran, is like the first actual event that's like, now we're getting justice. Like the Ayatollah has been a sponsor of terrorism for 50 years. They've been involved. They were part of from what I understand, part of the attack on a lot of the attacks in America. They chant death to America, death to Israel. This is their mantra. They're part of, I think it's the Shiite Muslims, Islam, the ones that just want to kill Americans and Jews. Which it's interesting because Americans are probably looked at as Christians, which are the children of Israel, children of the fathers. So it's like, I'm pretty sure we're in seal number 5, and I'm pretty sure that we're leading into the Great Tribulation, which the Great Tribulation seems to be comparable to the decree that Ahasuerus allowed Mordecai to make to get justice for the evil that was intended against his people. To where maybe the Great Tribulation, that's what it is. So maybe this escalates, this war with Iran, which my guess, and I'm not a prophet, I make no claims to be a prophet. At least I don't know if I'm a prophet. Nobody's ever told me I am. God hasn't come to me and told me you're a prophet, or given me special knowledge or anything like that. So this is just a guess. My guess, based on everything we've seen, is I do think that things are going to get bad, and I still think that there's where they'll say peace and safety and then sudden destruction. To me, that feels like it's a nuclear attack. So I'm wondering if this thing with Iran doesn't wind down and then somebody doesn't set off nuclear bombs. And that's based on the Gog Magog war, because there does seem to be some nuclear implications in the Gog Magog story. In that there's, certain areas which are not, which they have to have specialists to go in, and they have to mark the bones of the dead people, which that's what you would do. If anybody, did you guys watch that video from Chuck Missler? He explains all of that in his video. You can go back to the live feed. I put a link to that video for Chuck Missler describing that in the video from the live feed from Friday. But it still seems, I still think that we're in seal number 5. It's just not like any of the other seals. And if the timeline is right, so if this mirror image holds true, then the next seal, the next transition to the next event would be in August of this year, August 12, 2026. So over the next 6 months, there could be a lot of pressure. If nothing happens over the next 6 months, we're going to have to seriously reevaluate, which it's not going to take 6 months to realize that, we're really playing this day by day. Right now it's Purim. I don't know. I don't see any rockets hitting. I don't see any rockets hitting Jerusalem right now. I imagine they're going to continue to try. The IRGC, there are some holdouts from the IRGC. This new president in Iran, we have no idea what his intentions are. Donald Trump is going to talk to him. We'll find out if he wants peace or if he's just going to stall and delay and try and do something. Maybe this new president in Iran, who's taking over temporary control, maybe him and Donald Trump get to a point where they say peace and safety, and then once we start to stand down, then they attack with those hypersonic missiles are no freaking joke. Did you guys see those things hit? They're pretty crazy. They're really fast. But that's where we are. I still stand by. I think we're in seal number 5, and I think a lot of Christians. I really do think a lot of Christians are going to miss when Jesus comes back. They're going to be caught off guard. This is why Jesus says so many times that if you do not watch, I will come upon you as a thief in the night. Because right now there's a lot of Christians who have no idea where we are in the timeline because they have not been watching, or they've been watching through a bias. They think they know what everything means. They've lifted themselves up. They think they know what it means. They're not willing to be wrong. They're not willing to change from, what they're expecting to happen. Or they're of this mindset, which I see this with so many Christians. No man knows the day or hour, or I'm not a date setter. I'm so sick and tired of hearing people, I'm not a date setter. They're afraid to say, I'm afraid to set a date. It reminds me of the servant who's given the talent who buries it. They're afraid. Stop being afraid. Don't you know all manner of sin will be forgiven? So if you do something that's a sin, it'll be forgiven. There's only one unforgivable sin. And setting a date is not an unforgivable sin. So don't worry about it. We are here for such a time as this. Esther, we're alive now to see this prophecy be fulfilled because God wanted us here. We're alive during this day and age for a purpose. Don't be afraid to fulfill your purpose. But yeah, so I'll leave you guys with that. That was a pretty good night, pretty long night. Very appropriate. Enjoy, and go ahead and enjoy your night tonight and enjoy Purim. Lots of feasting and family and friends. Iraq is the last event. The Olympics. Let's see. You have to be able to prove that. Ceremonies are just, yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. If you like this content, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Come back here and visit us. We're live Monday through Friday at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, 4:30 Pacific Standard Time. I got that backwards. 4:30 Pacific Standard Time, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. So basically on the West Coast, we start at 4:30. And if you're in the East Coast, it'll be at 7:30 p.m. Thanks again so much for joining me. God bless you guys, and shalom, shalom.